Hello everybody, welcome to Aurabox. I am Aura, and in today's video we are going to be covering legendary gear and simming options for Retribution Paladins in Shadowlands Season 1 or patch 9.0.5. At the end of the video I will go over how to sim properly, and we will sim my character in slow time to show you guys how to do it. I will also link a couple of weak auras for certain trinkets if you have them, or if they just generally to try and help you guys. First topic we will cover will be the legendary option, or options, depending on your covenant, because that was something that was commented by Michael on my talents guide yesterday. So shout out to you, Michael. We will be covering the legendary options first in this video as a result. So going to the main screen. The legendary of choice, especially as a Kyrian Paladin, and for the AoE side of Mythic Plus, is Tempest of the Lightbringer. Now, what Tempest of the Lightbringer does, for those that don't know, is Divine Storm projects an additional wave of light, striking all enemies up to 20 yards in front of you for 20% of the damage that your Divine Storm dealt. Now, that 20% of Divine Storm's damage isn't the damage from the tooltip. It's not the 2.7k in my case. It's whatever your Divine Storm hit for. So multipliers such as the Judgment debuff, which is 25% additional damage, Final Reckoning, or any procs or stats that you may have, will be replicated by Tempest of the Lightbringer. Now, for other covenants, an option that you may have, depending on what your focus is, so you're not having to craft umpteen million legendaries, because Soul Ash is a bit of a grind. We all know Cho'Gath isn't fun at the moment, or it's not as fun as it could be. You have Magister's Judgment, which Judgment has a 75% chance to reduce the cost of your next Holy Power spender by 1. Sometimes this is paired with the Fire of Justice talent that I was discussing yesterday in the talents and rotation video, which I will put a link to in the description below and will be in this playlist. The big one that you will probably see a lot of non-Kyrian Paladins use, especially in the current season at the moment, is the Mad Paragon. Now, the Mad Paragon affects Hammer of Wrath and increases the damage that Hammer of Wrath does, while extending the duration of Avenging Wrath by 1 second every time you hammer. This is very much a single target based legendary. However, the reason you see it used is because with Ashen Hollow, the buff to Hammer of Wrath becomes multiplicative. In other words, your Hammer of Wrath starts hitting very, very, very hard. Now, you will generally see Sanctified Wrath or Crusade used with the Mad Paragon. Sanctified Wrath for AoE, because it increases the duration of your Avenging Wrath by 25% initially anyway, and every time you use a Holy Power spender, you will then pulse AoE damage. So they kind of feed hand in hand while Ashen Hollow's up. Again, it's very single target. Generally speaking, for AoE and for Mythic Plus in general, because of the point of Mythic Plus, in order to climb the higher keys, you need to kill the ads faster, because unfortunately, bosses are still going to take 2 minutes, well, 90 seconds to 2 minutes to down a boss. You can't really get that much faster at the moment. Obviously, there are certain dungeons like Necrotic Wake where you can use the weapons throughout the dungeon to help speed up the boss kills, but then that still puts the emphasis on the trash. So Tempest of the Lightbringer is a Ret Paladin's go-to for legendaries. Now, going on to the gear. Starting off with the stats. I will caveat this at the moment and say what we are about to discuss for the stats is completely and utterly subjective. Retribution Paladins are in a weird position at the moment where item level is king. You want strength and item level for everything. So if it doesn't have perfect haste or perfect mastery, don't worry about it. That's not what we need to stress about at the moment, especially getting you guys into Retribution Paladins. Once you're geared and you're running keys, then yeah, you can try and find the little bits of extra gear here and there to help. But we'll go into those options in a little bit. So just a quick talk over what the stats do. Obviously, critical strike increases your chance to crit. Nothing to really say there. Haste increases your attack speed and your melee swing speed. Again, relatively boring stat, doesn't really need much to mention. Mastery, on the other hand, increases the holy damage you do by a flat percentage. Now, I have 40% mastery, so my holy damage is increased by 40.3%. In a Mythic Plus setting, I'd recommend trying to get as much mastery as you can, because you want to double down into all of your abilities to deal holy damage. So, for instance, Divine Storm, holy damage. Templar's Verdict, holy damage. Consecration, holy damage. It's a 9-second AoE thing that you can put down on the floor and it just does passive pulsing damage. Everything that stands in it. Lovely spell. Underused. Shield of Vengeance, holy damage. Again, all of this is buffed by your mastery. So mastery and versatility are both flat damage increases in Mythic Plus. Now, the bit where we have the most say in terms of our gearing and options are our trinkets, because our trinkets will dictate or lend weight to one build over the other. So for the 1-minute execution sentence final reckoning build, a perfectly suited trinket to use for that is the PvP on use trinket. So the Sinful Gladiator's Badge of Ferocity, or if you haven't got the conquest for it, you could use the honor one. Perfectly fine to use, because what happens is you can macro this with Final Reckoning. So every time you go to Final Reckoning burst, whether it be with wings or without, because remember you can fit one of these 1-minute bursts in between your wings, you are always going to have a jump of primary stat. So in my case, every time I hit Final Reckoning, I get 193 strength every time, consistently, which is fantastic. And then my second trinket is it's a passive, on-hit, consistent trinket. So in my case, it's Vial of Putrefaction, which is single target, which helps in boss cases, because in AoE situations, I might put 1 stack of this debuff on 3 or 4 different targets, because Vial of Putrefaction, every 5 seconds, your next melee ability applies Liquefying Ooze. Now, because of the way our abilities are coded, something like Divine Toll, although it's an AoE ability when it hits 5 targets, it's coded for 5 single hits. So you do have to be careful when it comes to threat for abilities like this, as I have discovered countless times. I've gone to burst, all of a sudden I've ripped aggro off the tank, and it's like, oh, bubble, because I'm in trouble. So sometimes you won't get 3 stacks on the same target, you'll instead get 3 stacks on 3 different mobs. But it comes into its own single target encounters, boss fights when you want a little bit more damage. If you are running the 2-minute build, however, we have a couple of other options for trinkets. We can use the Instructor's Divine Bell. Now, it's a 90-second cooldown, which means it doesn't actually line up particularly well with anything. In every other use of Seraphim and Wake, you could get away with it, because Wake and Seraphim are 45-second cooldowns. However, if you're running the 2-minute build, what I'd recommend doing is holding Instructor's Divine Bell for wings. Every time you wings, you have this macro already, because it gives 668 mastery for 9 seconds. Now, that is double my current mastery. Now, my current mastery is 601. Pair that with the mastery bonus of Seraphim, which is 13%, and then also the mastery, at least as Kyrian Paladin, the mastery gained from Pelagos. Nope, that's Renown. From Pelagos, So the additional 350, or from Naya or Theatar, you can get very, very, very close to 100% mastery. And I'll show you. So at the moment, we are at 40%. Now, if we just build up, we'll get the 5, consecration. We've now got things. So 83, 96. That's 70% increased holy damage during our Sanctified Wrath. Our burst, as a result, bearing in mind I'm just doing this slowly and just working it through, showing you guys the stats, we hit nearly 20k DPS during a wings window on 5 targets. Now, Sanctified Wrath, as far as I'm aware, isn't actually capped in terms of how many targets it hits. Neither is Tempest of the Lightbringer. Divine Storm is, but Tempest of the Lightbringer isn't. So you can, in this 2-minute build with high mastery, every 2 minutes get past the AoE cap. So we can match Fire Mages, essentially. Not necessarily as high, because obviously Fire Mages are meta and unfortunately Ret Paladins aren't. But we can do a significant amount of damage during our wings windows. Now, I have been able to, focused, without trying to talk things through, been able to comfortably hit 26 or 27k during my wings windows on these 5 targets. Because you can also run Mastery Food, you can use Lightless Force rather than Sinful Revelation as an enchant, and you could also run Mastery Gems in your gear to get that Mastery up higher. Because obviously we do have diminishing returns past a certain point, but very, very soon it will be possible to hit 100% Mastery, which was giving us a 30% more holy damage through everything. So Zeal was hitting 30% harder. Sanctified Wrath was hitting 30% harder. Divine Storm was. And you can see how this builds up. So you're really doubling down on the 2-minute build with these trinket options. What you could also do to increase your AoE damage, swapping out of something like Violet Putrefaction, you could use your Sinful Aspirant, the proc chance primary stat trinket, extra strength. It's got a high uptime. You could also use the Decanter of Anima Charged Winds, so your melee attacks have a chance to do arcane frontal cone damage. And here the Inscrutable quantum device. We kind of have a problem with this particular trinket, and I'll explain why. It's a 3-minute cooldown, so unfortunately, it does not line up with anything we have in a nice way. The Sims say it is a fantastic talent to trinket to use, especially early on. However, you have to be able to guarantee that it will give you the stats you need. Now, one of the weak auras I will put in the description at the bottom is this little weak aura here, which tells me what the device IQD will give me. And it just says stats. Now, what we're going to attempt is we are going to see just how high our mastery can get when we use this. Because during fight, you can use it with your wings on pull, with a pride, with your stats and burst. And then towards the end of a fight, maybe it's Tyrannical Week, you could use it for the execute. Because when I have used it in open world, the execute has hit for 26, 27k. It hits like a truck. The only problem is, it means that every second use of this will line up with every third wings. So you can use them together at the start. So something like the other side. Dungeon, perfect example of this. First pack or first pull is usually the double pull at the very, very start. Sometimes you have Bloodlust. You can use everything there. You can use Inscrutable device and wings. Perfectly fine. Then you're probably going to be able to use it after the first pride spawns. And then you're going to have to sit on it and hold it until maybe the boss. Like if you're going to use it on her car. But for comparison's sake, we will now see how high we can get the mastery. Bearing in mind, we managed to get the mastery with the bell to 96% mastery, I think it was. So let's give this a go. So we'll generate our holy power like we did last time. We've got it ready. Wings. It's giving us mastery. 85. 98. It's giving us 98% mastery. So we've actually got more mastery this time, and it's increasing our holy damage done by 97%. And what was up at? And there, like, Sanctified Wrath was hitting, like its crit hit was 6.6, and it did 101k damage. If we go up to... If we go to this one, which was our other... With the bell, it did 72.6k damage. So the Inscrutable device gave us mastery and lucked out, doing it did 30k more damage almost. But again, this does then put you in that situation that you have to decide yourself. It could be a case of the Divine Bell hasn't been around for a while, because unfortunately it is very much RNG as to when it's up with the World Quest. Whether it's up with, we'll make an aspirant out of you for the Kyrians, or as was the case a couple of weeks ago, it was up with the Flight School 1. The article's on my head, letting everyone know it was up. You have the option between using the Instructor's Divine Bell for consistency every time you wings, or the RNG of Inscrutable device every third wings, because you will have to either use it on cooldown or use it and line it up with every second wings, so you will have a wings in between each usage. Not ideal, but it's up to you. Now, as promised, we're going to go into how to sim. So first things first, we have raid bots, and it's SimBot. You go into your Top Gear, and you've got here the load from SimC add-on. Now, SimC is an add-on that you can get for World of Warcraft that has this small item, Simulation Craft, and this is the loadout it gives you. This is all just text. So because I've obviously clicked it, it's no longer highlighted. So Control A and Control C. We've now copied this entire loadout for my Paladin. It's got my talents, it's got my abilities, it's got all this sort of stuff. We now go back to raid bots, and we plug it in here. And it's got everything. It's got all my gear, all my talents. So a good thing here, what we'll do is we've got Inscrutable Quantum Device, the counter on my charged winds, and we will also put the Instructor's Divine Bell here, and Gladiator's Badge of Ferocity. Now we'll scroll down, we'll replace existing gems and enchants, Lightless Force, Sinful Revelation, we've got our Mastery and Crit options. We can play around with conduits if we want, so for the sake of arguments, like I discussed that I usually lock in Virtuous Command all the time, but we'll put in Expurgation, and as an option because I am high crit. We will sim both if it'll let us. Nope, it won't. So what we'll do is we'll remove that, remove the enchant combinations, and it'll let us. Now, this is the big part. This section, the simulation options, is where you can decide how to sim your character. So if you're wanting to do patchwork, so a single target boss fight, one boss, 5 minutes. Now you can scroll down to here and you've got optimal raid buffs, no buffs. This is where you get to decide what you're running. So Bloodlust, for a single target patchwork fight, 9 times out of 10 in Mythic Plus, you're going to have someone that can Bloodlust. You may have a mage in your group. You may have a monk. You may even have a warrior if you're really lucky. You could have both. Could even have a Wind Fury totem. You can sim all these options here. Generally speaking, though, for Mythic Plus, to give you a more accurate representation, I tend to sim without this. So, because we're going to be simming Mythic Plus boss situations, you can put it to 5 bosses, 6 bosses, 7 bosses. I tend to run 7 because we don't always pull 5, or it gives me that idea of what my drop-off might be over target. Especially if I'm running against things like mages and stuff that are uncapped with things like Flame Patch. So we'll run 7 bosses, average fight length, 40 seconds-ish. And then we will find top gear. So that's running. Now we'll open up another tab. We will go to stat weights and we'll load our gear in here. And again, we have these options. But what we'll do is we'll wait for this simulation to finish to give us our best gear, and then we can make a more accurate set of stat weights should we need to swap any pieces of gear. Now, why is being able to do this good? Well, stat weights themselves. Here's the thing. As we were discussing between having big burst that doesn't necessarily line up and what lines up every time well, Instructor's Divine Bell, because it lines up so well with wings, every time we burst, it feeds into it. So it becomes a DPS increase by 900. Blimey. That's quite a DPS increase. Okay. So the Sims are saying that having a Quantum Scrutable device and Divine Bell, rather than my Valor Putrefaction, is better. Now, by having 2 on-use trinkets, unfortunately, there is a 20-second delay between when you can use them. So, depending on playstyle, this is just going to constantly give you mastery buffs throughout. Now, because of the duration of them, 20 seconds. So we now have a mastery buff for 20 seconds, which put, just using the Quantum Crucible device on its own, without Seraphim or anything like that, has put our mastery to 71%. And we can then feed that straight into another 9 seconds of the bell, the Instructor's Divine Bell, which keeps our mastery at 70% for 30 seconds. Which would mean that your Inquantable Screen device essentially turns itself into, in this particular playstyle with these Sims, would turn itself into an extra cooldown. You would use that outside of wings. and pairing it with Execution Sentence gives you that priority damage over Zeal. Now, having changed the talent and now equipped the legend or the gear it has told me to, the Sims, what we can do is go back to RaidBot with our new data. So Control C to copy and paste, and we will go to stat weights, Control A, Control V, and we will sim the options. So no buffs, generate the stat weights, and it will process this. Now, one thing I will caveat in terms of the Sims, you have to remember that Sims are a computer playing everything perfectly across the board. Now, that does mean that getting to these values is unlikely. This is purely a general pointer or a direction in where you need to go. So here's what you can see. For AoE, strength, adding like 1 point of strength is king. So item level will always be king by a sizable margin. It is over double the value of mastery. But then you have mastery, then crit, then verse, then haste. Haste is our last stat, because end of the day, we're not fussed about how fast we attack if we can make everything else hit like a truck. So now you have this information as patchwork, multi-target. You can copy it to the clipboard. We can go back to World of Warcraft, go to our pawn add-on, and then import and put it there. So if we change it from patchwork raid bots, purely because I already have a patchwork thing and I don't want them over changing, just put it to M+, and then OK, we now have the M+ option here as a stat weight. Now, if we show the scale in the tooltips and go to our gear, we can see that things like the Arachnid Cypher ring might be an upgrade. And then this is where you can start playing around with your gear, because it says mastery there. So we could put that in place of there, which increases our mastery. So now I'm at 666 mastery rather than at 601 like I was beforehand. So we get to now work out, okay, is losing that crit more beneficial? Or should I have stuck with my 226 ring? Because it was crit versatility. And by going through this system of playing around with your gear and using raid bots and SimC, you can start fine-tuning where your gear is best suited. Which is what a lot of people will say if you ask for advice, and they'll say SimC. But what the strength of pawn specifically is also when you're looking at dungeons. So no, I was right, Shift J. So looking at dungeons, Mist of Tinaside, for instance, prime exist, like you can go through this and you can have a look and see, oh, okay, these are versatility mastery shoulders. They could be an upgrade for you because pawn will come up and say, like, these are an upgrade. The reason it's not here, obviously, is because I'm running 220 shoulders and they're obviously only 184. If you can get good using this now, when 9.1 is released and the item levels of everything is brought up, you will see much more benefit from simming because it will allow you to target certain areas that have greater upgrades for you. So say, for instance, the new mega dungeon that's coming out, there might be a trinket in there or a set of rings that are ridiculously strong for your character. Like they might be a plus 20% upgrade. So you know that you need to go do that mega dungeon. And once you've got one of those rings, you can resim, and then you find out that the other ring's now only a 3% upgrade, but a ring from Plaguefall is now a 15% upgrade. And you can chase your upgrades like that and get a good balance of your stats based on what your priority is. So, having covered that now, I'd like you guys to comment below, like, subscribe, and let me know if there's anything I could have covered that would have been more benefit, whether it be add-ons, tips, tricks, guides, anything else you guys can think of. Let me know, and I will get back to you as soon as possible. And if you have any further discussions and comments that you'd like to go over, whether it be legendaries, trinkets, anything of that nature, please feel free to come and hit me up on Twitch. I stream pretty much every night between 7 and 8 UK time on an evening. And we can discuss any of these things, and we can discuss other classes as well. I don't just play Paladin. So, thank you very much for watching, guys. I hope this guide has been of use. A little bit longer, but it's as concise as I could have made it. So, again, yeah. Catch you guys later, and I hope you enjoyed.